LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, uh, Instagram. I don't know if we're on there or not. But thank you for tuning in. Double points if you're tuning in live. And please say hello. Let us know that you're here on whichever social media platform you're on. Say hi, and we should be able to see that. If you're watching the replay, thank you. You don't get double points, but you definitely get points for tuning in. And you could definitely, we would encourage you to still interact with us and ask questions as we'll be monitoring this chat for the next couple weeks. I want to introduce you all to just the perfect guest to have the day before Thanksgiving. I really was stressing out looking for the perfect guest to take us into a very complicated holiday that kickstarts a very complicated time. It's a time when we're supposed to be thankful. It's a time when we're supposed to be happy. And I don't know. It's like that song, It's My Birthday and I'll Cry If I Want to. Times when I'm supposed to be happy, I find very difficult to be happy. So um, Rita Ernst is the owner of Ignite Your Extraordinary. She's an organizational consultant and who emphasizes the convergence of happiness and productivity to create positivity, committed, and high performing organizations. She holds an advanced degree in organizational psychology from Clemson University. Rita is an adjunct professor for graduate and undergraduate students. She's been published in several national magazines and is a regularly featured podcast guest on many popular podcasts. Her first book, Show Up Positive, was released actually this past June, right? There it is.
Yes, yes, yes.
So, Rita, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on the Water Cooler.
Thank you for the invitation, David. I'm very excited to have this conversation today.
Yeah. So, a little while ago, Adil introduced us, and if Adil's watching, say hello. But Adil introduced us as we made his list as part of people to follow, and I thought that was so kind.
Yes.
Lots of pressure there, especially when I saw who else was included in that list, including Rita Ernst. So I knew that you were somebody that I need to get to know, and I'm so excited to have started to follow your content and to get to know you. But Rita, as much as I like you, the next step here is, as I warned, 6 and 60. We've got to challenge you. 6 questions.
Okay. I'll do my best.
All right. Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready. I have no idea what to expect. So here we go.
All right. Rita, what is one thing that you would like to see stick around after this pandemic?
Connectivity.
When you are feeling overwhelmed or burned out, what do you do to reset and recharge?
Sleep.
In addition to your other talents, I understand that you're a bit of a master chef. What's on the menu for tomorrow?
I'm not cooking tomorrow, but I did make pecan pie to contribute to the menu tomorrow.
Ooh, pecan pie. And said like a proper Southerner. I'm from Maryland and I call it pecan. And said pecan in Georgia once, and it was very embarrassing for me. One notable trait of your favorite boss of all time.
A good listener.
What's the best piece of advice or wisdom you've ever received?
People tolerate your conclusions, but they act on their own.
In 5 words or less, what's the meaning of life?
Hope.
Wow. We're going to put an asterisk by this because you actually made it. I went off on a tangent about pecan pie. That was not fair. You actually made it. That was really impressive. And the fact that
it's a lot of one-word answers. I don't know if there's a lot of depth. You can read a lot between the lines of those answers.
And we've got time to explore. So, but to start with, I want to know a little bit about you, your origin story. How does one become the positivity influencer? Where did your career begin, and how did you get here?
So my whole career has been same passion as yours, organizational psychology, which is just the study of how people come together in the workplace to make stuff happen,
Mm,
and all of the social dynamics and other things that are at play. We look a lot at social psychology, motivation theory, learning theory, all of those kinds of things. But very early on in my career, so I fell in love with psychology. I decided that I didn't want to treat people's, you know, therapeutic needs from a personal point of view, but I'm sure you would agree that there's a lot of therapeutic needs in the workplace. And
mhm.
sometimes my clients call me their therapist because that's sort of what is going on. We're looking at the dynamics in the organization and trying to treat those things. But I did this value cards sort, and it a long time ago as a very young 20 something professional, and the card at the top of my deck was legacy. And, at the end of the day, David, for me, it is always about, am I leaving people in a better place? He said people talk about their why all the time, and my why is just really that simple. It's with each conversation, each connection, am I leaving somebody in a better place? And so that's really been my driver throughout my career and what's led me to different things. And the pandemic, even though the a lot of the boomers grew up post World War II, um, we've got generations now in the workplace that have never really had in the US, not in other countries, in the US, that never really had the trial and tribulation that we had in the pandemic, where all of a sudden we had, the government saying we've got to change things for public health reasons and really prescribing things. It's been a new experience in the US for us. And it, as you know, in psychology, that triggered a lot of things for people.
Mm,
Being told what to do, feeling incompetent or uncertain. We don't deal well with uncertainty just as human beings in general. And so all the discontent that we experienced in any area of our life got magnified a thousandfold, and it permeated for many people,
mhm,
and it differed in how long it took. For some people it was instantaneous, for other people it took a longer amount of time. And we saw on the news, we saw people losing their minds, like walking into a store and tearing down the rack of masks out of
mm,
frustration and anger and stress and anxiety. And it was sort of in all of that, I was rebranding myself and my business. And I self anointed myself with this moniker, positivity influencer, simply because that was what I wanted to bring into the world at this moment in time, because that's what people were searching for and finding difficulty holding on to. It felt elusive. And I just wanted to serve in that place where it was needed. And that started for me with essential workers.
mm. I love that story. You saw a need, and you were there for it, and I absolutely love that. Um, Debbie Potts is tuning in all the way from London.
Hey,
Thanks
Debbie.
for
Oh
tuning
my
in,
gosh,
Debbie.
I feel like, oh, I'm getting celebrity love here. Thank you, Debbie. I
You are
love
an
Debbie's content.
international
It's
sensation.
awesome stuff. Yeah.
so so you're there, and you're trying to help people through these other things, and I know that that life very well, when you're helping people, especially when it's about morale, motivation. I do a lot of work in burnout, etc. And and there's this thin line where suddenly people are laying down on the couch and telling you about their daddy issues, and you're like, whoa, 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 that's not the type of psychology that I practice. I just watched a show. I wonder if somebody knows the name of this. It's this new show on Apple TV, where there's run this massive multiplayer video game thing, and it's about the office behind that. And the first episode, the HR director, everybody keeps coming in and telling her all about their psychological issues. And she's like, this is HR. What are you doing? So that reminds me of that. But there was a need that that you saw and needed to fulfill. But I have a question about that. And first of all, Catherine, Rita is so amazing. I just love her attitude and positivity. That makes two of us. Thank you so much, Catherine. And Alicia, not that kind of psychologist. Absolutely, another IO right there. So, so the world was getting more negative and uh, more cynical. Uh, you have this rise of incivility. You have all of these things. So certainly there is this need to remind people look on the bright side. But at the same time, I witnessed this pushback against that. It's almost like, why are you talking about positivity at a time like this? Don't you know how dire everything is? Right? It's almost like it feels wrong to be positive when things aren't great. Does that make sense? And do you ever experience that pushback? What would be your answer to something like that?
I actually wrote a whole chapter in the book that sort of speaks to that very question, David. And after I finished my book, I read The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. Are you familiar with that book? Have you read that yet?
I am not.
You might want to check it out. She uses Dante's seven circles to create the structure around the lesson she's teaching in the book. It's
Mm,
phenomenal. And after I read her book, I literally wanted to reach out to her and say, can we write the way of integrity for organizations?
mm,
Because in many ways, I felt like what I was trying to say and show up positive and what she was saying in the way of integrity, which is really a personal development book, but the ideas were the same because for me, positivity is about integrity.
mm,
Positivity isn't a pretending.
mm,
It's about being true to all of your feelings. I recently sent my child off to college, and at the time I was really grieving that, and at the same time I was super excited for her. But we are complex as human beings. So I can be sad and I can feel joy. They can coexist together and hit different parts of my heart. And recognizing both of those things is part of my integrity, right? I'm allowed to mourn as a mother sending a bird out of the nest, but I'm also allowed to be jubilant for her about the start of her journey in college. And so I think that coexisting of things is at the core of positivity. You have to start with being true. It's okay to say this sucks, but just hanging out in this sucks gets you nowhere.
mm.
So it's this sucks, and yet what?
Hmm.
And the positivity is in the answer to and yet. This sucks and yet.
Right. And what are you going to do about it? Right.
Yes, yes.
This past week, selfishly, I was looking forward to seeing you all week because this past week, my dog, just shy of 7 years old, passed away, and it was a surprise. It was last second. I think he was sick for like 2 days before we found out that he had this malignant cancer all over his insides, which was pretty horrible. But the thing that made it most horrible, but also in a strange way beautiful, was that this was the first dog I lost as a father, and to see my kids and the way they grieved was interesting and beautiful, and seeing the diversity in how they grieved was beautiful. But my one of my daughters, I won't out her on here which one, but if you know any of my kids, you'll know which one. Um, but she was having this moment of running around with the younger kids and having so much fun a couple days after Percy, our dog, passed away. And she did sort of like this flip over the couch. And then she stands up and says, I miss Percy, almost like to my wife and I. and then went and started playing again. So I called her over and talked to her about what was that. And there really was sort of this guilt or shame in I'm having a fun time, I'm enjoying life, and my dog died 2 days ago. Right. And so
Right. Right.
so I had this talk with all of my kids about how it's okay. All the feelings are okay. And if you're not feeling it's okay and etc. And I saw in your book you talk to the value of all the emotions and how valuable each all of them play in your life. So can you talk to us at all about toxic positivity? Because that's something that sort of showed up in the vernacular, and people were really uh, awoken to toxic positivity, um, such as when I go to my manager and tell them that I'm angry, sad, frustrated, stressed, etc., and they start telling me all about the silver lining. How how do you deal with toxic positivity? How do I ensure that I'm not being toxically positive? Um, how do we make sure that we are exactly as you said, being authentic in our positivity?
I think at the source of toxic positivity is that we are discounting the other person. When we respond back and says, "Yeah, but look at the silver lining," or "all things are not really that bad," or well, one of the good things you might want to focus on instead is there's a failure to really communicate first to that person. I see you, I hear you, I want to understand you. And I think that is when those conditions are not met, you are opening up the opportunity for this toxic positivity conversation to emerge. And of course there are cultures, you ask me and I gave you the quote, people tolerate your conclusions but they act on their own.
Right.
There are a lot of organizations that just want to tell people, compel people to behave a certain way, think a certain way, put the veneer on. But when people don't really own that head, heart, and hands, when it's not integrated into who they are, at the end of the day, they're going to follow their heart and mind, right? Not, they'll comply until they can't comply anymore or until they have the moment that they can do what's true to themselves. And so I think there are those two things. I think there are toxic cultures because they just try to pretend to be something that they're not. And they just try to have everybody's sort of character acting and everybody knows their character acting and it builds up resentment. That's one form of toxic positivity. But in the example that you gave of just me as an individual, and when I'm trying to lessen somebody's load by saying to them, hey, look on the bright side, am I being toxic? Am I being a toxic friend? And my answer to that is if you didn't take the time to acknowledge and hear and understand, you are probably on that path to being seen in that way. There's a beautiful line. I think it's in the Love Warrior book by Glennon Doyle where she's exploring our need, this job description we've given ourselves as human beings, which is to save other people from the hard things. And her conversation is, what if it's not our job to save others,
Hmm.
but it's our job to be witness to that, to just be present and witness and hold and support. And I think that's what people need first. So it's really about where do you start? If you don't start with saying, I see and hear your pain, that sounds really difficult. Do you want to tell me more about that? If you don't connect with people first, if you're not really making that genuine connection, then I think you are positioning yourself in that place where you could be perceived as one of those, people that are just like, put a smile on it, make it all great and fine and good. You
Right.
can't be positive if you can't be truthful.
Mhm. And
I mean,
yeah,
that's at the
and
core of my description of positivity.
I love that description because you're the positivity influencer, but you're not a clown. You're not a comedian. You don't come out and be like, "Hey, look, everything's great." Your version of positivity is deeper than that. I feel like, and I really appreciate this idea of people needing to be seen. And sometimes I see people that are so positive, they're they're um they're sort of scared of those negative emotions. They're
Yes.
repelled by the negative emotions. And so there's this discomfort when people bring it to them. And so it's this selfish thing. Let's brush it under the rug. And then the person, just like you said, doesn't feel seen. And so they feel even lonelier and more alone and vulnerable than when they trusted you with that conversation. But Debbie has a question for us. Debbie said, "Is being positive a choice?" Which is a great question. Is it personality, uh, or is it choice? What is it? I ask because when I went through my horrible disease, throughout it all, I chose to be positive, and people around me just didn't understand why or how I could be so positive. I just made a decision to choose positivity. So how much is of that is was Debbie's choice versus her genetic makeup or whatever it is or personality traits that kind of primed her for that? Thanks
Well,
for that
thank you
question.
for the question, Debbie. And my whole manifesto in part one of my book says positivity is a choice.
Mhm.
So I firmly believe that positivity is a choice. And my favorite example of that is from one of my favorite books, Good to Great, and it's the Stockdale Paradox. Are you familiar, David? So in the
With the book,
Stockdale
yes.
Paradox, yeah, Admiral Stockdale was the highest ranking um, um, I guess, soldier that was held at the Hanoi Hilton. I think it was 8 years. It was like one of the longest standing times. And he tells Jim Collins, the author, about his experience. And he actually, there's a whole section in the book called "The Optimists Are the First to Die," and that's his phrase.
Mhm.
And and he's talking about the difference between foolhardy optimism, which we had a lot of during the pandemic. Oh, this will be over in May. Oh, this will be over in
Hmm.
November. Oh, I mean, there was all these false promises.
Right.
And so he said, at the Hanoi Hilton, what happened is people be like, oh, we'll be out of here by Christmas. And then Christmas would come and Christmas would go. And what Stockdale said is people die of a broken heart. And there are similar stories from Auschwitz and the Nazi camps as well, of people who've been in internment camps, that they die from this false hope that they're creating. And it's not real hope, right? That's not true optimism. And what Stockdale says is what got him and his soldiers through was this unwavering belief that they would get to the other side while also being completely brutally honest about the facts of the situation. And that's what Debbie's saying. She was being brutally honest about, I have this disease, and yet she was choosing to have unwavering faith that she could emerge from the other side of that and not giving up hope on herself and on her health. And so that's what positivity is. It's not ignoring or discounting, it's recognizing all of the challenges, all of the difficulties, all of the hardship, and saying that exists. And yet, I'm not going to let that define me.
Mhm.
And what's going to define me is the next choice I make. And that choice is going to be something that is positivity to me. And what's showing up positive for me in this moment can be completely different than what it is 10 minutes from now, 10 days from now, 10 years from now, and definitely different than you, David, or the next person or the next person. We all define that for ourselves. It's about understanding what you need most and saying, I have the source within myself to start by giving that to myself. And then maybe other people will reflect that back to me as well.
Yeah. And part of what I'm hearing in Debbie's statement around her question is, which should be shocking but isn't, is that it was almost, it sounds like there was judgment on the person who's suffering from the illness, right? That they are questioning why she's being so positive. It's kind of like my daughter with not like making sure everyone knows I'm still sad, and I think that that's, also speaks to a lot of what we've spoken about. But that's it's it's really interesting that we try to regulate other people, and here you are, you're
Yes.
talking about, being a witness, as opposed to thinking that we have to fix it, but giving people that space, I think, is really important. And when you talk about the Holocaust, it reminds me of course, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. When he really
Yes.
talks about it in logotherapy, he talks about meaning coming from suffering, that it's not even hope about the other side, but that that there is meaning in the suffering itself somehow, which is, I think, such a brave thing to accept and define. Um, but Alicia said, well, she says, this whole conversation reminds me of the Disney movie Inside Out, where joy tries to keep sadness from taking control and things go horribly wrong. We need to accept all of our feelings as natural and okay, within healthy ranges, of course. 100%. And she followed up with this question: how would you say factors like poverty can affect the choosing of positivity versus negativity? Great question.
I think that is a great question. Thank you, Debbie. Yeah, it is okay to have a moment where you are sad or you are down or you're feeling defeated. I mean, I think when you are in the real struggle, I mean, there are first world problems, and then Alicia is talking about more like third world problems, right? I mean, and a health scare like Debbie went through, there are times when you're just going to feel disheartened, and you're allowed to sit in that and recognize it's just recognizing in this moment, I'm feeling really disheartened. And then the question is, do I want to stay here or do I want to emerge from this? And then who or what can help me get to the other side of this? And these are the stories that we hear from people who are living in poverty or do have socioeconomic limitations. We call it bootstrapping and all of these things, but they look at what's happening around them. They look at those limitations and they say, that's a limitation, but I have agency to figure out a creative way past that limitation. And so it may not, it may be a harder journey, it may be a slower journey, it may not rise to the same level as somebody who starts the race at a much further down the path, right? But I do think that I think what your socioeconomic situation or your health condition situation, or even let's just talk about things like um, your family history. If you're the first one to go to college, if you're those kinds of things, when you don't, every generation strives to leave the next generation in a better place. And so if you're coming from a striver generation and you're emerging to a place where others in your family have never been, you are not going to be at the same operating level as somebody who's coming from 3 or 4 generations of people who've been already operating at that level. They're going to know the inside roots, they're going to have the connections, all of those things. I think the difference that it makes is maybe, like I said, how fast you can go, potentially how far you can go, the time and intensity required, the relationships required, all of those things. But I don't think it prevents that from being possible. It just changes the dynamics of how it looks. But I'd be curious to know what you think, David, and if there are other listeners that have a point of view about that.
Yeah, and please share your thoughts on that in the chat. Um, I was thinking back, so I have done two things most of my life. I've been an entrepreneur, business owner, and I've also rapidly had kids. Um, so before my wife and I knew what it was to have kids. Suddenly we had like three, and then four, and then five. So there have been moments in my life where I am in a panic trying to figure out how I'm going to feed my employees' families, and of course, first, and then how I'm going to put food on my table. And in those moments, one of the things that strikes me, and part of it might have to do with my conflict style and my personality, but when there's that overwhelm and you know logically that the answer is to have agency and to take action, there is so much uncertainty and so much fear and so much stress that I found that I freeze and do the exact opposite
Mm.
of what I should be doing in the moment. I freeze, and it makes it more difficult to push through. And so we know that two things. So like the decision fatigue and other things that hit people who are are on that lower economic status, and they really struggle um, to just keep processing when they're struggling to survive and support themselves and maybe their family. That's happening at the same time. There's this, time is really not their friend, and so you tell them to take agency, but how, like, where do we find that? Where do we find that? Is there something like something where they could just start with something that makes a difference? I guess that would be an individual thing, right? To find something that's empowering. Is that?
I think it makes a big difference the people that you have around you,
Mm,
right? The community that you surround yourself with. When you have people around you that you can seek guidance or help or comfort, that the decision fatigue is real. I mean, just fatigue is real. So when you have somebody that you can talk through, we were talking about this before we went live. I'm an extrovert processor. A lot of people are. You get more clarity when you talk out loud. You
mm,
know, I
mm,
Paul Hari. I don't know if you follow him on LinkedIn. He's worth a follow, and he's an expert in belonging. And he talks about the fact that we have like 4,000 thoughts a minute rolling through our heads. So when we talk or when we write, we actually have to slow our thinking down, which is why those two practices often bring us clarity. Now, I've certainly been in the whirlwind of time when writing is not giving me clarity, or it feels like very sluggish, it's very hard. That's usually when I need to talk to somebody.
right.
But I think the bigger thing versus circumstances is that social structure and support. I think the more alone you feel, the more disconnected you feel, I think the harder the struggle.
Hmm. Yeah, and I know oftentimes when people are struggling, there's some shame involved, which, and then the reaction to shame is to disassociate and to pull back from others. But there, let's talk about this support idea for a second, because I know there's vast amounts of literature about the value of support, coworker support, supervisor support, external support, in preventing burnout. Um, how do we, as leaders, HR professionals, how do we ensure that people are getting the amount and type of support that they should be getting? Are there any tricks to that, or is it just a question of just be supportive?
My go-to is always curiosity and asking questions and seeking and paying attention. It's funny that you picked this particular line of question, because I just wrote my blog for my email list for next week, and perception or perceptive is the show up positive spark for the week, like really being perceptive of other people, and then that's tapping into your emotional intelligence, right? And so I think that support is in the eye of the receiver.
Hmm.
And people often do things like give you the silver lining speech as a way of offering support, but it doesn't land that way, right? And so, yeah, I think that it's really being in tune and paying close attention to how what you're offering is being received or not received, and then getting curious to really understand more. It's in court, and I spent the first 16 years of my career in corporate life and in HR, and it's really easy to want to have a neat and tidy one size fits all solution and move on. There's so many competing things. And it's part of the reason why support alone can't come from HR. I mean, support really needs to come from the team, from your coworkers, your teammates, and the leaders within that team. And then that's where the best support's going to come from. They're going to know you the most, and it's hard for somebody that's not very connected to give the kind of support that we need. The more connected we are, so that means closer into the team, but it also means in yourself. There's a lot of guidance in Show Up Positive about introspection, about really thinking about what do I need, where do I want to be, and then asking the question, so how could I help get that? Do I need to ask for help? Is it something I can do? Is it, but that kind of introspection, I think, is very important, because when somebody comes to you and says, David, I see you struggling, I want to help, what can I do? Um, it can be hard to have an answer. If you don't have an answer, the answer might be, help me figure that out. Like, let's have a conversation to figure out what I need. Like, I'm just so overwhelmed. I don't even know
Right.
what to ask for.
Right.
I don't know what support would look like right now. Or
Right.
you might have had some time to think about it. You might know what you want. The worst answer is, I'm okay, nothing. There is no shame. Whew, am I
Yep.
back?
Yep. Well, we heard you through it, I think.
Okay,
There's
okay,
no
there we go.
shame.
There is okay, there is no shame in asking for help. There's no shame in accepting help. And it is, when you give help, when you do something positive for somebody else, you get a personal boost of positivity from that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right. And so when somebody is offering that to you, it's not just a gift to you, they are getting something good from that as well. So remember that they're not out of this equation, right? They're getting a little positivity boost too, just like you are.
Yeah. It makes me think back to that um, now ancient pop psych book, maybe the first one, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Um, well, where Carnegie talks about um, if you want somebody to like you more, the natural instinct is I should do things for that person. But in reality, you should get them to do things for you, and then they'll like you more. People like people that they invest in. So there's definitely giving support definitely helps both parties involved. And it's also highly contagious. So even if you're not
Yes.
directly connected to the frontline employees, you're connected to the managers who are connected to the supervisors who are connected to them, and it starts trickling down. Whereas the opposite of that, incivility, is equally contagious in the workforce. So it can really start anywhere, on the org chart. But Alicia says there have been some really interesting studies on how poverty affects financial choices and even employment choices that builds on Daniel Kahneman's work in behavioral economics. It also impacts how those of us who grew up in severe poverty in America react in all situations. It changes the way our brains process information, reacting from the threat center as opposed to the critical thinking center. As more and more people are subjected to difficult financial situations, I could see it becoming more of an issue. Wow, great! That's a great piece of writing. First of all, that and great thoughts. I can always count on Alicia for something like that. But it is true, and I think The question is, because these things are so intertwined, it's hard to help somebody um, in one dimension without the other. It's like I grew up hearing, attitude is everything. And that was like my dad's mantra, and it became my mantra. But then I saw like one of my kids in particular thinking, well, I had a good attitude, so it should all come together. Well, you need attitude, you need hard work, you need support, you need luck, you need a whole bunch of things, So I think that you're absolutely right that there are these systemic issues, and we've got to be supportive of each other to help people through. Wow. Um, So, okay. So people are feeling helpless and maybe not so positive now. Tomorrow morning, we're going to our Thanksgiving dinners, or tomorrow night, or ours starts in the morning. It's Thanksgiving breakfast, lunch, dinner. Um, and so we're going to be with family, and these politics arguments are going to show up and things like that. And Thanksgiving is all about gratitude. How do we ensure that we're really internalizing sort of that gratitude lesson that's sort of baked into Thanksgiving, and having a positive experience with our family, let alone when we go back to the office? How do we practice gratitude? What are there any tricks to like get us there where we start seeing uh, the bright side a little bit clearer?
Well, as you know, we are conditioned. It's biological for us as human beings to give more attention to the negative things in our life. It's called negativity bias. It's a real thing. It is part of what helped us as early man, fighting our way. You wanted to know where the risks were, and you were giving extra attention to those things. And that's exactly what Alicia was talking about. Like when you have true economic risk, like you start really giving attention to those signals, and it really defines your view of the world, because that's the way our brains are designed to work. And so for folks that are part of my audience, that join me for the Monday Minute or read my weekly email, I gave the challenge to start working on this as early as last week, because it is a practice. Knowing that your mind is automatically going to give more attention to the negative things, you have to really train yourself. I call it, it's like calisthenics for your mind.
Huh.
The more practice you have on noticing the good, the positive, of being intentional and really practicing that intentionality, then you're building muscle in that direction. So it's not that you're not going to get derailed necessarily by that comment that knocks the wind out of your sails, but you can recover from that because you've been working on your mindset. So if you've not been doing that work, it can feel a little tricky, but
Start cramming
one
now.
of my, yeah. So one of the things that I direct people back to is Chris Argyris's work on the ladder of inference.
Mm.
And I talk about this in the book as well. It's I think the third tip in the capstone of the book. But what I recommend that you do is I recommend all of those things that think about those things that you're dreading, right? The all of those conversations, all those things that trigger you. And there's an exercise called the left hand column. So, what you want to do is grab a piece of paper, fold it in half vertically, or you can make two columns on your computer. And in the right hand column, you're going to lay out that conversation that you are dreading coming your way at the holidays, just the way you remember it from the last time it happened. What somebody said, what you said in response. So you're going to work the right hand side of the page first and capture to the best of your ability what you think that conversation has been or will be like, right? but has been is the best. And after you've captured all of that, then on the left hand side of the page, you're going to reread what the other person said. You know, whether like the easy ones for me to talk about are things like, so when are you going to get that job promotion? You know, your cousin Johnny just got a big VP job and he's got a big promotion. He bought a new Mercedes and they're looking for a bigger house. And and in the left-hand column as you're reading that sentence stated by, you know, some family member, you're going to write what are all the thoughts that are going in through your head when you hear that, you know? And it's usually things like, oh, here we go again. Tell me all the ways I'm not good enough. You know, I'm expected to keep up with Johnny, you know, and there might be some other things like I'm feeling really disappointed. I just got passed over for that job I really wanted. Like there's all of this, there's this sub conversation that's that little thought in the back of your mind that's going all the time. You're capturing that on the left hand side of the page and noticing how you're getting triggered into those conversations. You get no control over what anybody who is a guest at that Thanksgiving meal says.
Yes.
The only thing you have any control over is you in that situation. So by understanding the things that are getting triggered inside of you when this is going on, you can prepare your little, like, you know, self-protection mantra that you're going to say. And it's helpful when it's something like this. So the perspective I think is helpful to take is, what if this person isn't trying to take a dig at me? What if they really care about me and my success and the fullness of my life and wanting to see me achieve all that is possible and reach my fullest potential? And what if this is their way of showing interest in love to me? Even though it's triggering all this other stuff, what if this is just the only way they know how to express all of that hope and concern and care that they have for me? So what am I going to say in that moment? You know, am I going to, you know, if instead of choosing the irritation, can I choose, okay, here comes the conversation of love, care, and concern, you know, and then so you might say something like, that's really exciting. Tell me more about Johnny. Right? Mm-hmm. Or you might say, I love that you care so much about my success. You're such a good supporter of me. Thank you. And then you don't even have to get into all the rest of it. A lot of times, that's all it takes is, you know what, all that other person, as soon as you acknowledge, you don't even have to get into the tit for tat that you might have gotten into further down the page. You can save yourself from some of that. But in most instances, I think that I think about some of the elder statesmen in my family, and, you know, they thought it was their job to give you a little kick in the pants to help you, you know, feel that need to get to that's the job description they gave themselves. And they didn't do that to be a thorn in my side. They did that because they thought that was what I needed. And that was their way of giving me something they thought I needed. It didn't matter if I wanted it or not, right? And they weren't really trying to be mean. They thought they were being helpful.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the story you tell yourself about why people are saying or doing what they're doing that is tripping you up the most.
Yeah, control your controllables and understand what's out of your control.
Yeah.
And it's almost counterintuitive, but when you do something like that, you're taking the control, you're taking the power. What if they did mean it as a slight, but you decide that you're going to take it as a compliment? Think about how that deflates the other person. Yes. I remember, so I spent some time working in retail and food service, and I remember some of my employees would come to me and they'd tell me all about this horrible customer. And once this person came to me and said, "Oh, I hate it when people put the dollar right on the counter instead of putting it in my hand. So I took her change and I put it on the counter. And then she had to, I'm like, that's not empowering. First of all, I didn't understand why she would tell me as her manager. That just seemed crazy. But that's not empowering. It's actually the opposite. Um, Oftentimes, I'll, in my kinder kind of workplace speech, I'll tell my audience to stop being a dummy because when you think of a dummy, you think like I pull this lever and the arm goes up, I pull this lever and the leg goes up, and it's just completely reactive. But imagine if you could stop being the dummy and you can control the tenor of the conversation or the temperature in the room, right? Um, I remember so my wife is a teacher, and I remember once I had this opportunity to be in one of her classrooms. And so she walks in, and I'm right with her. And we walk into this room, and there are kids everywhere in the room, like causing all sorts of trouble, scribbling on each other. Some kids up on a desk, mooning everybody. And like my response in that moment would be to jump up on another desk and say, "Hey, stop!" She did the exact opposite. She got down on the floor and started whispering and said, "Friends, friends, gather around, gather around." And then she had to talk to them about respect and everything that at this tone. But when she got down there and started talking in this tone, every kid in the room, including the kid with his pants half down, got down there and met her where she was. Like it brought the room down like this. And when you have this opportunity to instead of be reactive, but to take this and we feel like this pressure, like I'm not going to be disrespected, so therefore when somebody's rude to me, I'm going to be rude right back. But you don't realize how empowering it is when you can just flip the script and not play their game.
Yes. I mean that is the perfect example of what I'm trying to teach in Show Up Positive is this idea that you start with showing up with who you want to surround yourself. Start being the people you wish you had around you. Start behaving in the way. Start creating experiences that are the experiences you wish you had more of. Right? If you wish people were more honest, be more honest. If you want people to express love in a particular way in your family, start by leading that expression of love and do it for yourself. Again, you get something positive for that. Don't do that to try and force other people to change. I think what you'll find over time is it will attract other people to mirror because they are getting such good things out of that. But you have to let go. There are three words, would, could, and should,
Hmm.
that you need to eradicate from your vocabulary this holiday. When you find yourself saying, she should, if he would, she could means I didn't ask for something. She could have helped clear the table. I could have said, hey, I would love to have your help clearing the table. Let's chat about blah, blah, blah. Right? You could have you know, he could have offered. I could have asked for, I could have asked is the other side of that. So when you take away the could, should, would, and you're just present in the moment, and this is who's showing up with me, and I get to control who I am in this moment, how I show up and who I want to be. And I don't want to be, like you said, I don't want to be reactive. I don't want to get on the desk and do the crazy. I want to show people what it's like when we really come together in a respectful way. I'm gonna be that presence for everybody in this moment. This is my gift that I'm offering, free of any obligation to anyone.
Hmm. I love that because you're eradicating the helplessness part
Yes.
because you're not hooked on things that are out of your control, tricking yourself into thinking that they're in your control. And it might take time. There's definitely a time gap when it comes to conversion as opposed to conformity, right? That we know that if people are very good at going along to get along, but when there's something new, so in a toxic workplace, there's this new idea that that the people here with us today decide I'm going to go in and I'm going to be positive, everybody's not going to get on the same page right away. And so I love what you're saying about don't go in there with those expectations. It's not about that. But we know that over time, conformity, conversion happens. And so people see it over time, and it takes some bravery and some learning, but then they get there. And it would be a shame if you gave up before they have the opportunity.
Yeah, go along to get along is in the what show up positive is not.
Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful, Alicia. Yes.
So, okay, I know we're running out of time, and this is crazy because I love this conversation. But, Rita, how do we become part of this show up positive movement? What can we do today? How can we connect with you? How can we get your book? What's our action item going forward here?
So use the QR code over my head to get to my website, igniteextraordinary.com, and everything that you need is available there. All my social links. I'm probably the most active on LinkedIn. So if you're a LinkedIn listener, that's a great place to connect with me. Please do so. The book is my distributor is an international distributor. So the book can be sent anywhere in the world. So you can access it from anywhere. Amazon and Barnes and Noble that have e-sites are really easy places to go to, but you can also support your favorite local bookseller. And if they're having difficulty finding the book, they can pull the ISBN number off of Amazon or whatever and get it, but they can be ordered anywhere. And I've got a special that's going on for Small Biz Saturday right now that includes a signed copy of the book. If you're interested, you can see about that on my website. It's $99. It's a workshop and some show up positive cards that you can take with you, as well as a signed copy of the book. But the one thing that you can do right now is take some time to really visualize who you want to be at that Thanksgiving table tomorrow. Who is that person that's going to show up in the room? And do the left-hand column conversation thing if you need to, but think about who is that person and what are the things that might derail you from that path. Have a little plan about how I'm going to take in information and just start there. Just start by being the person. You know, if you wish that the people at your table were more thoughtful of others before they speak, be more thoughtful before you speak and call it out. When you see people being thoughtful, call that out. Catch other people behaving the way that creating those experiences that you want more of, and acknowledge and appreciate. And the more you acknowledge and appreciate, the more we know behavioral psychology, right? You're going to reinforce it. You're going to see more of it. So you want to know what you want, catch people doing it, and show people what it looks like through your example.
Right. And if all else fails, depending on the family, either lock up the liquor cabinet or or double down on the liquor. I don't know which helps. Some families, the drunker they get, the friendlier they get. I don't know. Other families, it's quite the opposite. So
and at the end of the day, you can say, this has been a lovely meal. Please let me help with the cleanup, and I'm going to need to leave. And if you need to, and if people are disappointed that you're leaving, are you going to disappoint yourself or are you going to disappoint others? I say be true to yourself. That's showing up positive for yourself. If that means you need to leave early, let them be a little disappointed. That's okay. They'll survive that disappointment. But take care by being true to yourself.
yeah, hi Casey.
Thank you, Casey.
So I'm going to circle back and make sure that we have your reading list. If anybody was looking for a 2023 reading list, like I think Rita has provided that today. So your homework is definitely to start with Show Up Positive by Rita Ernst. Absolutely. But we also mentioned Wave Integrity, Love Warrior. We mentioned Good to Great, Man's Search for Meaning. What was the book on the ladder of inference that you mentioned?
Um, Peter Senge's The Fifth
Oh,
Discipline, I think, is the first
mm,
place that that work was published that was not a
academic.
academic journal.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Debbie, and thanks for being part of the conversation. Thank you all for being part of the conversation today. We are going to make sure to get you these links. If you have not done so yet, you can visit our links by hovering over our QR codes. Please stay in touch. Next time, so we're talking 2 weeks from now, 2 Wednesdays from now, same time, same channel at the water cooler. We're going to be featuring Lena Scullard. This is going to be a great talk that I promise you it is going. We sort of skirted around some of these things today. We're entitling it Taking the Wheel, Holding Yourself Accountable for Better Results. I anticipate this being a little bit of a controversial topic, and I'm hoping that it is, and I'm hoping that you all will be here to let us know when you agree, when you disagree, and to share your questions and comments just like you were here today. Thank you, Rita, again for being here with us. It was an absolute pleasure hosting you for such a special and timely episode. And thank you all for tuning in. If you're watching the replay, please continue to comment, like, share, all those other things I'm supposed to say, but I'm definitely not hip enough to say. All I know is if you comment on here, we will respond. So thank you all for being here, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, David.